how do they know how far beyond design basis to go? Are they looking at another set of things that were sort of thrown out as too remote when licensing happened?
No, it's not in terms of the natural phenomena. It's in terms of our preparations to, if there's a small remote chance that it could occur, are our procedures in place to deal with it? And it's across a number of fronts that I went over before.
Okay, thank you.
Before I move on to our next question, I'd like to let everybody know that it is star 2 to get out of the queue if your question has already been asked. We'll go next to John Ciliano with Inside Washington Publishers.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out if you've had any discussions with Boxer's staff on which way she wants to go with hearings that are going to come up. They just released a statement, her and Carper, on requiring NRC to do a full review of every plant with the same design as the Fukushima, in addition to the letter that Feinstein and her sent yesterday. But also, I just wanted to see if Alex, if you had any conversations with Bingaman staff as well, who are also planning hearings, and then what you consider the interplay between EPW and Energy Committee in the Senate.
I'll leave it to the two committees to discuss their jurisdictional issues. We have talked to both Senator Boxer's staff and Senator Bingaman's staff, and of course Tony appeared before Senator Boxer yesterday at the EPW briefing. We were aware of the fact that Senator Boxer was going to send a series of letters to the NRC requesting certain information. I have not seen something that you referred to that she may have put out. We've talked to Senator Bingaman and to his staff. He indicates that he's going to have one or at least a hearing, but he wanted to give it some time until all the facts were available. Thereafter, we'll see how it unfolds.
And as far as Boxer moving ahead, is there any plans here for a specific policy, or is this just like sorting out through the wreckage, so to speak?
I wouldn't characterize it anyway. She asked a series of questions yesterday, beginning with how many nuclear plants are there in the United States, and indicated that she was going to have a number of inquiries into the future. It's clearly Environment Public Works has jurisdiction over the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities for that committee to oversee both the regulator and the licensees in the United States in the coming months.
What about Carper? Any discussions with Carper? I'm sorry.
Senator Carper was also at the briefing yesterday. We've had numerous conversations with his staff. He has, I remember, he said yesterday on a number of occasions, anything he does, he can do better, and I think he expects that of the U.S. industry as well as of the NRC, and made it clear to both the industry, I don't want to say the witnesses before the briefing, but both Tony and Chairman Yatsko.
Is there any bearing on the CES? That's my last question, just on the clean energy standard. Does this have any bearing on that?
Let's see. I think this certainly will complicate already very complicated efforts to put together energy legislation in the Senate.
Complicated, okay. Do you want to expand on that?
It means it gets really complicated.
No, I think the prospects for energy legislation are already hard enough to deduce. We need to give this some time to really understand what has happened in Japan, understand the repercussions of that. Members will come back from this next week recess. Maybe at that point it's time to ask and answer that question.
Okay, thanks.
Next up, we'll hear from Jim Ostroff with the Plants Nuclear Publications.
Yes, hi. I have two related questions. Can you give us some information on the status of the spent fuel pools in Unit 3 and 4, and particularly 4, which the chairman yesterday said was devoid of water? And related to that, really, does the presence of plutonium in MOX fuel in Unit 3 create greater challenges immediately to stabilizing the situation, or in the case where core material would be ejected?
Let me start with the first question.
Yes.
You know, you correctly reported what the NRC said yesterday. Reports we're getting indicate that the pool still maintains water based on observation from a self-defense force helicopter. There were videotapes taken and studied that also showed water in the pool. That's good news. It appears that the liner is intact. The other reports we got that there has been some damage of the surrounding walls beyond the liner, but the liner appears to be intact. It's I believe not enough information to determine whether there's a leak in the pool or not. But the fact that there's still a pool to inject to, based on some of the reports we were getting yesterday, is very, very good news. I'm sorry, could you repeat? Oh, MOX fuel. Yeah, there's already elements of plutonium in used fuel, whether it was mixed oxide fuel or the normal fuel we use. It is not going to complicate the recovery actions with respect to any of the Fukushima plants. Yeah, and one last clarification. Our understanding is it's Unit 3 that has some MOX fuel as part of its core.
We'll go to Ben Geeman with The Hill.
Yeah, thank you for having the call. This is a question for Tony. Sorry, I was having, frankly, a computer problem at the very beginning of the call, and so I just got a little tiny bit of those first things you walked through down. You were walking through the actions that the chief nuclear officers had agreed to take.
We can send you that if you'd like.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
We have Ray Henry with the Associated Press.
Hi, this is probably an elementary question, but in terms of the 4 actions you outlined, how are they different from anything the NRC would ordinarily require you to do? Certainly some of these things are things you need to do to have your license to operate, if I understand correctly. Does this go above and beyond? What's the difference between this and what you normally do on a day-to-day basis?
Right. As I let me try to explain better this time. Most of the requirements that licensees must meet from the NRC are associated with design basis events, which are stylized, I'll call them worst case scenarios, with you have to assume certain equipment failures, etc., and then demonstrate that you can safely shut down the plant. Some of the requirements also go slightly beyond design basis, and they're included in some of the actions that I walked through before. But based on our initial assessment of the Fukushima event, we believe we already do on a daily basis all the surveillance testing of equipment, procedures, etc., that comply with the design basis related requirements that we must meet every day. These beyond design basis events, some of which are covered by NRC regulation, a lot are not, was the most important area to focus on beyond the baseline things that plants already do. Does that clarify your need?
Yeah, give me an example of something that goes beyond design basis. I mean, design basis when you're building a plant, are you told to meet specs of earthquake of X magnitude? I mean, explain to me how this goes a little bit beyond design basis.
Yeah, well, I'll give a for example is after September 11th, 2001, the industry did an assessment of what contingency measures could we put in place following an aircraft impact. And a number of contingency measures were put in place. For example, there's a portable diesel-driven pump available at each site in the United States. Let me contrast that with Japan. They had to bring in a diesel-driven a fire pump that are used to injecting water into units 1 through 3 and 4. We've already got that on site. We've looked at where we can connect it. We've got the hoses, connections, procedures, training associated with it. So we're going to go make sure that we're ready to implement, if needed, those types of procedures that aren't the ones that are used on a daily basis. Does that help a little?
Yeah, so these things you're looking at, these are things that you would not expect to have to use on a daily basis? I mean, is that correct?
Oh, no, we wouldn't. These are contingency measures, given that, we can do the best planning and analysis and We can never guarantee zero risk, and we need to be prepared. And I think one of the things, it's a hallmark of our industry, is that while it's going to take a long time to understand the Fukushima events, we will learn from them. We will get that operating experience. We will apply it and try to make our units even safer than they are today.
Are you going to report these findings to the NRC when you do them at all of your sites?
I suspect we'll see some review activity by the NRC. Right now, we're not intending any reporting mechanism. Basically, what would happen at the sites is if they find something, they would typically put it in their corrective action program, so it'll be tracked, followed up on, and closed out. The NRC
Is the
has
corrective action program available to the NRC?
It is. It is. It's part of their baseline inspection program.
Okay. So the results of these inspections will not necessarily be reported to the NRC, but you assume that some of what their findings may be reported in a corrective action program, which would be?
Yes, and the NRC has access to everything the licensee does on site, and I would not be surprised if there's some form of oversight and inspection as we implement this.
Have you received any communication from the NRC about new plants or any guidance on sort of your new reactors coming online, how they will handle this? Obviously, we're not necessarily looking at decisions on new plants in the next day or two, but it's coming down the pike. Have you gotten any guidance or advisory?
No.
Let's take 2 more questions.
All right, we'll take our next question from Kenneth Fletcher with Exchange Monitor.
Hi, I had a question related to some nuclear projects here in the U.S. that are dependent on Japanese financing, specifically the South Texas project and USEC's centrifuge plant. And I know that the loan guarantees, the U.S. loan guarantees are also somewhat dependent on Japanese financing. Can you guys comment maybe a little bit about how their prospects are affected by the incidents?
First of all, we're not the experts on financing of those projects, and secondly, we haven't seen any information in the last couple of days in that regard.
Okay, and so you haven't heard about the Japanese investment bank and how they've been affected by
we're not the
by
people.
these events?
We're not the people to ask about financing questions.
But we have not heard anything in that regard.
Correct.
All right, just checking in. Thank you.
And our next question is from Coral Davenport with the National Journal.
Hi, thanks. I know you guys said that you're not the experts on financing, but I still wanted to ask, is there a concern that, even if there's not a freeze or halt on new nuclear plants in the U.S., just that the liability costs could go up, that construction costs could go up, that cost of regulations could go up, that could be something that that freezes new nuclear development? And then one other question, the fires at Fukushima, looks like the most destructive element is coming from the nuclear waste from the drained spent pools, and I'm wondering if you can talk about if that will prompt another look at how spent fuel rods are stored in the U.S. I know that a lot of concern has been expressed about how densely and tightly packed spent fuel rods are stored in the U.S.
So, Coral, it's Alex. I'll take the first part. And then I'll turn it over to Tony. Only to say this: that NEI's forecast has been for 4 to 8 new nuclear plants between now and the year 2020, and with TVA, Southern, and SCANA saying that they are going to continue their construction plans, we see that forecast as staying unchanged through 2020. And we have never been able to do a forecast beyond 2020 because so much of that depends upon market conditions. And so at the current time, we see the new reactor construction proceeding as previously anticipated.
And with respect to your question on spent fuel pools, there's been a lot of analysis done on inventory of spent fuel pools and dry cask storage, etc. Will there be more review of that? Perhaps. I can't tell at this point, but I already know there's been a lot of reviews already done with respect to the inventory of spent fuel pools.
Thanks very much for taking part.